Cold Lake, Canada. One of the few places in the world that is so vast, skyfighters can fly supersonic without crossing borders. They're here to prepare for war.
As fighter pilots, we're using controlled violence on behalf of our respective governments.
They're also here to train, because a pilot's survival depends on three things. Training, the supersonic speed of their fighters, and their reaction time. Because in a real war, speed of reaction is the difference between life and death. But could this be the end of an era? In the future, they might not train in a jet at all. War games could look like this. This is Virtual Flag.
To some, it may look like a computer game, but this is not Xbox Live. This is effective training.
In the future, pilots could be fighting wars in a completely different way.
Perhaps one day we can control the whole fight from something that looks very much like a simulator today.
In other words, pilots controlling unmanned planes. But what will this mean for the skyfighters of the future? Exercise Maple Flag is held here at 4-Wing Cold Lake once a year. It's where skyfighters can train for the way aerial wars are still fought today.
Maple Flag works in trying to simulate a very intense combat environment without anyone actually being killed. We do use a progressive approach. It lasts 10 flying days. The early missions are more simple in nature, but as the days progress, we make the air threat more combative, and we also have surface threats in there to make the environment more deadly.
The frontline fighters of today are the F-15 Eagle, the F-16 Fighting Falcon, the F-18 Hornet, the F-4 Phantom, and the Mirage 2000. They'll be flown here by 100 pilots from 6 nations and supported by over 1,500 ground staff. Non-explosive bombs will replace the real thing, but Maple Flag will still push the most promising young pilots to the limit. They already know how to fly fast. They spent more than 2 years learning how to control their supersonic jets. But do they have what it takes to survive one of the most realistic air combat exercises in the world? Captain Kenneth Lim is from the Republic of Singapore Air Force.
Okay, that's one.
Because of a lack of airspace at home, he's had to train in Australia, Europe, and the USA. So his preparation has been fragmented. Maple Flag will offer him a more complete approach.
I think I'm rather eager to be here and to see how everything turns out in the exercise. It's gonna be an experience where I can see how all my training comes together.
All pilots are competitive, and Kenneth's training officer, Major Dale Flick, is no exception.
I think that we're all Type A personalities, and we carry that with us in the air. We all want to win.
Kenneth Lim will be flying in a friendly coalition known as Blue Force.
There's our flying area. That covers most of Northern Europe.
He'll be challenged by Red Air, highly skilled American dogfighters from the 64th Aggressor Squadron, Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. Their job is to shoot Blue Force down before they even reach their targets.
We play the bad guys. So the whole time we're here, we're trying to simulate enemy or potential enemy threat tactics and capabilities.
But for today's skyfighters, training methods are already changing. Over 2,000 kilometers away at Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, in the United States, it's day one of another war. At the Distributed Missions Operations Center, American Doug Nasira is fighting a virtual aggressor.
And friendlies there. In the same mission, I had F-16s that were in the same formation in virtual land flying off my wing, when in reality they were actually flying simulators over 400 miles away in Arizona.
In fact, over 80 pilots from different U.S. Air Force bases around the world took part in this mission.
And controlling all this, entire virtual war is no kidding a command and control function that's actually stationed at a Kadena Air Base, Japan, when in virtual land we're actually all in the same airspace, all talking at the same time.
This is Virtual Flag, where flight simulators thousands of miles apart are linked together to fight the same kind of war that the pilots at Maple Flag are fighting.
I got the radar pictures playing.
Virtual Flag was developed to reduce the hours of expensive live fly pilot training.
Osborne, target direct.
They can come together with their joint or coalition warfighter participants and practice the way they'd actually engage in a theater of war.
And to maximize the pilot's training, scientists are taking the virtual world into 3D.
In the future, we can expect to see higher fidelity simulators with more realistic capabilities. So when a pilot steps from his squadron over into the simulator, it is going to be just like stepping into the jet.
Over the next 10 days, 100 skyfighters will train in Maple Flag. A giant live fly exercise that will teach them how to fight the aerial wars of today.
Now Panther 6-3, Sabre, and Feather 6-1, 6-2 all push. They're all going in low.
For young pilots like Kenneth Lim, it will be the first chance to prove they are brave enough and quick enough to survive the heat of battle.
This is 3-2, knocking off arm safe.
Well, for myself, I naturally want to bring myself up to the next level, be a better pilot. And also coming here and giving a chance to work with other countries, I can see how other pilots from other air forces put together their tactics and how they execute it. So it gives me, I can learn from such experience.
To add to the realism, the intelligence unit gives the pilots a mission scenario similar to a conflict they may one day find themselves fighting.
Basically here our scenario has a region that is very oil rich, and one country claims their rights to this area, and we basically create an alliance force to go in and basically reclaim that territory.
Right now, the BNO line is between Chosen and Hound, and it's 5509.
Our job is to read the daily message traffic or intelligence and gather from that what we think the pilots need to know. From there, we assist them in planning their mission for the day, in which case we tell them what the threats are going to be.
On day one, the threat is only a small force of red air aggressors and minimal ground threats.
Victor 14, 130.
On another part of the base, the aggressors are preparing for the same mission.
This is going to match up with the card there. Are you guys taking off first at 1920?
The aggressors fly F-16 Fighting Falcons. But so they can be easily identified in the air as the enemy, they're painted camouflage green, blue, and brown. They'll play the part of their old enemy, the Russian MiG-29, a formidable air superiority fighter. The F-16's flying systems and radar are adapted to match the MiG. Kenneth Lim also pilots the F-16. His job in the mission is flying escort to a formation of 8 bombers.
And this mainly involves me taking out enemy air threats, enemy aircraft, so that my friendly aircraft can go in and drop their bombs on the target.
As Kenneth's instructor, Major Dale Flick is concerned about the young pilot's lack of experience in such a big exercise. So he'll fly with him in a 2-seat F-16.
I think one of the biggest weaknesses that Kenneth will have to overcome while he is at Maple Flag is flying the proper formation while simultaneously working the radar and targeting the hostile that his flight lead has directed him to.
The F-16 Fighting Falcon is known fondly as the Viper because it looks like a snake about to strike.
You can fly up to twice the speed of sound, and it pulls up to 9G, which is approximately 9 times the weight of your body.
During Operation Desert Storm in 1991, US Air Force F-16s flew 13,000 sorties, more than any other jet, attacking airfields and Scud missile sites.
It's capable of engaging enemy air threats beyond visual range, and it can do air-to-ground missions too, so it's a multi-role aircraft.
Also flying in today's mission is another first-timer, Lieutenant Raphael Klaschka from Germany. His senior partner in their F-4 Phantom is Weapons Officer Major Christian Henlich.
We share the responsibility. The pilot is primarily responsible for flying the jet, while the weapon system officer is responsible for working the radar and making tactical decisions.
Like many pilots, it's a case of like father, like son. And for Lieutenant Klashka, the need for speed goes back 2 generations.
Since I was a kid, I always grew up close to fighter aircraft. The reason being my dad was also a fighter pilot, and my grandpa was also a pilot in the Second World War for Germany. So I always grew up with airplanes, and always being fascinated of all the noise and the pure speed of them. I always do a really nice job of flying a jet airplane. For me, it's the nicest thing you can think of. Not forgetting that it's still flying a weapon, and we have to do our job really professional. But that doesn't mean that we don't have any fun.
Raphael and Christian will be on the same escort team as Kenneth Lim, dogfighting the aggressors and clearing the way for the bombers. Their jet, the F-4, is the oldest of the current fighters at Maple Flag. It first saw service in the US military in 1961. Because of its age, it's the least capable fighter in the exercise. But having both a pilot and a weapons officer can give the slower F-4 an advantage in clever strategy and fighting ability. Even though non-explosive bombs are used, the roles of the fighters are the same as in a real war. Escorts dogfight with the air threats. At the same time, other fighters attack surface-to-air missile sites. In military terms, this is called SEAD, or suppression of enemy air defense.
Cobra 6-1, report 10 miles.
The whole purpose is to clear the way for the fighter bombers that attack strategic targets like military bases and industrial sites. In this exercise, the pilots need to see for themselves what went right and what went wrong during the mission. To do that, a pod containing a real-time system of assessment is fixed to the wing of each plane.
So what I do is I put in a little cartridge, and then the Maple Flag folks are able to just basically see everywhere that my jet was at during the entire sortie, so that when we come back for the debrief, we can recreate where all the different jets were throughout the entire mission. So that's all being recorded on this pod right here.
Each pod sends its information back to a control center at Maple Flag headquarters, where the jets are identified by color. Red for the aggressors, green for the bombers, purple for the jets which will attack the missile sites, and blue for the escort jets like Kenneth's F-16 and Raphael's F-4.
35 coming in from the south.
Identifying each jet by color is important for these people, who operate virtual surface-to-air missile sites against Blue Force.
He's pushing hot. Go.
But instead of using the real weapon, they fire radar signals at the jets that replicate deadly missiles.
And we're waiting till these aircraft come in within a certain range, and we start engaging them and try to take them off their target, which is the biggest thing, or actually bring them down by surface aircraft missile sites.
Maneuvering. Once Darrell identifies a jet, he instructs one of his team to lock onto it with the radar.
Take him out.
Then fire a virtual missile. The team can simulate a number of different weapons. Some are highly classified, but are known to travel many times faster than any jet.
Obviously, we don't want to engage too many aircraft within the same formation because some of them have to actually get some bombing training done. And so I'll target certain individuals. And I'm watching from a threat point of view when they're starting to enter the lethal range of the missile, and then I'll tell the operator to go on this aircraft or that on aircraft.
And launch.
The aim is to test the pilot's speed of reaction.
Our goal here is to make things instinctive for them, so the reactions are automatic and stuff, and that's our big purpose. So we hope it's beneficial.
2 or 3 forces, say your altitude.
To avoid missiles, Kenneth and Raphael use information they receive from AWACS. giant airborne warfare and control systems.
You're following those F-15s inbound off your nose for 5 miles.
The AWACS fly high above the fight and gather information with their powerful radar. Put bombs on target. Raphael and Kenneth are amongst the first to push into enemy territory after the aggressors, and the first to see if their reaction speed can cope with the information overload and the adrenaline rush of combat.
Big 1, direct 5-mile missile 3-1 right here. Following a single F-16 off your nose for approximately 10 miles.
When you get to put into a large package of aircraft, there are new challenges they may not have experienced before. Just simple things like communicating, having 8 aircraft on the same frequency.
Before 10 miles at runway 31.
Trying to fly amongst so many other aircraft that they're not used to.
Oh, it's going to be close. This is 3-3, knocking off on safe.
You'll have 2 radios, one going off in each ear. You're looking at the radar, constantly seeing activity that you're just not used to seeing. Many airplanes out there. The bad guys' airplanes are looking at you, so all that information's coming in. There's an awful lot going on in a Maple Flag mission, that, especially the young guys that have never seen it before, and it's an awful lot of task management that has to be taken on by these guys.
It's a high-pressure world, and the young German pilot doesn't want to slip up.
The most fascinating thing about it is when you go really fast is the responsibility you carry, because like if you do a little mistake, it can end up with losing your life. And so it's a really tense thing.
Heading at 180, we contact west on 311.2, checking with heading and angles.
The escorts get the bombers to their targets without loss and return safely to base.
Everybody can take a look at their pod numbers.
The data from each pod is combined and played back on a large screen.
All right, let's go with this.
The pilots now find out exactly how the mission went.
Pod 060 for 11, 2800 heading 250 H aspect.
All right, looks like a match to pod 42. Call mate your timeout. Play.
If a pilot thinks he's defeated an aggressor, he calls out his time and altitude.
Stop.
If it matches the aggressor's coordinates, it confirms a kill.
Defeat those as a match to pod 48. Good job defeating those. Play.
Raphael Klashka didn't register a kill, but he wasn't hit by any virtual missiles either. So he's pleased with the mission.
Yeah, it went very well. It wasn't a high-threat environment, and we had to defend sometimes missiles flying at us, but I think it went well.
Kenneth Lim also had a good day. He took out 2 aggressors, and his Singapore teammates defeated another 6 enemies before they could attack the bombers. And as far as Dale Fleek is concerned, Kenneth has exceeded his expectations.
He's going along pretty well, but still a lot of exercise left to do, so hopefully he'll be full speed by the time we leave.
Back at Virtual Flag in New Mexico, Captain Doug Nasira has also been tested and successfully completed his mission.
Pass 1, splash, successful, out north. What we did today was we had an entire sweep of air-to-air players to clear out the airspace. We had us as strikers going in and taking out targets on selected airfields, setting up for, in the next couple of days, an actual airfield assault. Well, now we can actually grab that intel, bring it back home, and then carry on operations from there. So it's a big integration of a lot of different players all around.
But instead of spending months planning an expensive live fly exercise, then traveling a long way to execute it, pilots get the same training instantly without leaving home.
Warfighters can step out of their squadron building, go across the street to where their simulator is, plan, brief up to what the mission is going to be, actually execute.
Air bomb's gone, 45 seconds.
And debrief that mission, get some good salient lessons learned that they would apply in combat, go back to their squadron, and then go home to their families for dinner.
And like Maple Flag, Virtual Flag provides the complete combat scenario.
From the Air Operations Center, the decision makers, all the way down to the guy who's actually hitting the pickle button on the bomb or launching a missile on an adversary. And it can actually see the effects of what they're doing instead of having to fake it in a live airspace or having to confine by the rules of a live airspace.
And battles that are about to be fought in a real-world hotspot can be rehearsed before the pilots even fly there.
We can put together a scenario fairly quickly and we can practice that scenario with the actual people who are going to employ that scenario over and over again. In other words, the first night of the war, so that when we actually go to war, we've already been there, we've already done it, we know how we need to react, we know how we need to employ, we've tested the scenario, we know to a certain extent how successful we're going to be.
These are things in the past during Freedom Iraq where because we passed the information incorrectly, friendly forces have died. By being able to practice these processes here in a distributed environment with virtual participants, we are now able to ensure that processes are effectively practiced, taught, and executed, so when they go into combat, they've seen it before and it seems easy.
And in the future, virtual training will be even more effective when every flight simulator is three-dimensional. At the Human Effectiveness Directorate in Mesa, Arizona, part of the U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory, computer scientists and weapons experts have developed the world's most advanced flight simulator.
8,000 maneuver hot.
We think our test beds are among the best in the world because they represent the state-of-the-art for current virtual simulation, plus technology innovation. Sure. So what we have is an environment in which the cockpits are highly realistic, they provide full visual systems, and you have a robust mission environment that integrates all those components.
Today's virtual simulators only allow the pilot to see about a third of what he would see in his jet. But at Mesa, the scientists have developed a prototype using an ultra-high resolution projector. It gives the pilot all-round 3D vision.
Piper 1, Splash 2 ship, bug out 330.
And allows him to accurately assess the size, distance, and type of aircraft he's fighting.
Piper 1, Fox 2, trailer.
As if he were in a real jet.
Piper 1, Tower 2, minus 5 miles.
Captain James West from Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, has flown in both Maple Flag and Virtual Flag.
These simulators are great. You go to a merge, you go to a fight, and you actually visual with an enemy aircraft. In the real world, we fight each other a lot. So we'll fight F-16s versus F-16s, and the F-16 is the bad guy. When you go to that merge, you look down, you see another F-16, and you pretend like he's the bad guy, and you shoot him. Whereas here, you go to a merge, and there could be a MiG-21 or a MiG-29 or a Su-27, and you see what kind of aircraft that is, you ID it real time, and then you decide whether or not you're going to shoot it.
And sometimes pilots actually forget where they are.
Because you get so focused on the task at hand that you're actually worried about whether or not there's actually a missile coming at you, and you're worried about what threats there are that might be rolling in on you unnoticed, if any. So you're concentrating, and you're pretty deep in the fight.
But there are some things a computer simulation can't do.
Simulator training will never totally replace live flying. The reason is because you can never replace the stress levels of actually getting threatened or killed.
Request countdown from below. Clear handout for below, EC6 reporting, 3-man. EC7 is engaged.
After 5 days of live flying, the Skyfighters are proving they have the speed of reaction to survive.
Designated clear target direct.
And even though the virtual world is less physical, these pilots still need to have the same skills.
Dallas 069, 23, 18,000.
But one thing all pilots need to do from time to time is let off steam. This is a Canadian game called Crud.
Crud is a game that is played on a snooker table. You're basically throwing the white ball against the colored ball and trying to sink it into the pocket.
This is one of the few times in the Air Force when it's okay to manhandle a senior officer and get away with it. 2 teams play. Each shooter gets 3 turns. If he misses, he loses a life. The game is won when the colored ball is sunk in a pocket.
I believe it's a pilot's game because it involves hand-eye coordination, an element of aggressiveness is required, and the ever-present competition.
Day 6, and the mission leaders meet in the planning room to put together a new challenge. Each day, the mission scenario gets tougher. The threats are increased, requiring more skill and more courage from the pilots.
The simulated enemy becomes more aggressive as we go along, and to do that we increase the surface threat levels, the air-to-air threat levels, and then we as White Force, or exercise staff, will make the actual taskings more challenging as they go along.
More powerful threats move into position on the range. ADATs, air defense anti-tank systems that work just as well against planes. They're operated by the Canadian Army.
They have a range of approximately 10 kilometers in the air, and they have a penetration of about 900 millimeters of steel in the ground roll.
Fire lock on him, Pat, if you can.
As well as the ADATs, Daryl Garfield's team will also increase the pressure on the pilots with more powerful virtual missiles.
They can go anywhere from the speed of sound up to 7 times the speed of sound. And that's all taken into account when you're engaging the aircraft.
In today's mission, Blue Force have been instructed to attack these increased ground threats.
30, 57.
Maneuvering.
As one of the F-16s escorting the bombers flies into range, Daryl Garfield chooses his target.
Okay, Kara, you should be on Team 5 now.
At 15 kilometers from target, radar picks up a signal bouncing off the metal skin of the aircraft and locks onto it.
You see a skin return as walking around. It's nice and strong, and that tells us we're actually painting this airplane with RF energy.
The pilot now learns from his own radar in the jet that he's been targeted, so he begins to maneuver. The operator launches the missile, which has a life in the air of around 10 seconds. But at the supersonic speed it travels, the pilot needs to react immediately to escape. He maneuvers hard, lights up the afterburners to gain airspeed, and fires off flares to confuse the tracking sensors in the missile.
And he's trying to get out of range now. He's out at 18 kilometers.
If the pilot is quick enough, the missile runs out of fuel and falls back to Earth, defeated.
Yeah, next.
That's one pilot whose speed of reaction has passed the test. Day 10, and the pilots gather for a match. Told by Unit Intelligence that the government of Red Force are using a legal industrial facility to chemical weapons.
Okay, got the spotter and wheel pushing out first.
Blue Force is being sent to destroy the factory. Captain Brandon Robinson of the Canadian Air Force will fly on the bombing mission. It's his second week of Maple Flag, and the most important thing he needs to remember is the first principle of formation flying. Stay close to your flight leader at all times.
Well, I'm expecting a lot of airplanes airborne at the same time, and hopefully to remain visual with my lead the whole time. Other than that, anyone's guess. We got 6 minutes before we get to start.
Brandon is flying the CF-18 Hornet, Canada's frontline fighter. In 1999, during NATO's Operation Allied Force in the former Yugoslavia, CF-18s flew nearly 680 missions in multiple roles.
It's got 2 jobs actually, air-to-air and air-to-ground. So we call ourselves strike fighter pilots, capable of delivering ordnance. At the same time, when we come off target, we can defend ourselves from an air threat. So it's very capable, very easy airplane to fly. It'll do about Mach 1.8, and it'll go pretty high, 48 to 60,000 feet. So basically just a really capable aircraft.
Fighters are a bit like motor cars. Everyone has their favorite. But in reality, each aircraft has its own strengths.
So which one is better? You can't. It really depends on the situation you're in. For example, an F-16 is a smaller aircraft, but many models of F-16 have enormous amounts of power. They're able to maintain their energy very, very well. F-15 is bigger airplane, bigger radar, potentially carry more weapons. F-18, when you're fighting at slower speeds, for example, it's a very, very maneuverable aircraft. Again, a lot has to do with what kind of software they have, what kind of processing power they have. It may sound like a cliche, but what it really boils down to is who's flying that aircraft and in what situation you find yourself in. You can have a very, very capable aircraft with maybe a less experienced pilot flying it up against maybe not quite as capable an aircraft, but an extremely experienced fighter pilot. And the outcome may be surprising. Often the winner of a battle is going to be he who exploits his strengths and the enemy's weaknesses the best.
Bombing the chemical weapons factory with the Canadian Hornets will be the French Mirage 2000s, two-seat fighter bombers.
Nous partons à 4 avions. Nous allons aller sur le chantier le range de Collec et nous allons délivrer de l'armement, des bombes d'exercice. Et si on peut, on va essayer de tuer MiG-1.
The French-made Mirage 2000 is the only jet at Maple Flag with a triangular wing design. This gives it a greater wing area than the F-16, allowing it to carry more fuel. And, like the F-4 Phantom, the Mirage also has a two-man crew.
Et on s'entraîne comme si on allait participer au premier jour de la guerre. Donc, nous, notre spécialité, c'est de délivrer de l'armement. On vole très très vite et très très bas.
The Mirage, F-18 Hornet and the F-16 all operate using a system called fly-by-wire. This means the pilot does not physically control the ailerons, elevators, and other control surfaces, as in older jets like the F-4. In the newer planes, it's all done by computer. The F-16 was the first fighter to be designed this way. It not only gives the jet superior maneuverability, but the fly-by-wire system allows F-16 pilots like Paul Battiche to concentrate on tactics and weapons. His team's job today is to protect the Strikers, Karg and Brandon's bombers, by destroying the enemy's missile sites.
So I'm taking a 4-ship of F-16s. We're going to go out there and protect all the Strikers. We're going to send high-speed anti-radiation missiles in against surface-to-air missile sites if they try and shoot down the Strikers that are going in there. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll have 12 missiles to shoot at these SAM sites.
Delta 3-1, calling our altimeters at 3009.
To help pilots cope with the G-forces on their bodies when they throw their jet into a tight turn, they all wear a special flying suit. It's called a G-suit.
Zippers just make sure everything's nice and tight. It's all laced up. Little garters down here, pull your legs in case of an ejection so they don't start flailing around. This little hose here connects to an air supply, which pressurizes the G-suit. Whenever you pull G's.
When flying flat and straight, the effective gravity on the body is 1G, the same as on the ground. But fighter pilots can experience G-forces of up to 9 times their body weight while in combat. This causes blood to flow from the brain to the lower body, leaving the pilot in danger of blacking out. Wearing a pressurized G-suit forces the blood back up into the brain. And pilots have other techniques to combat G-forces. One of them is called G-straining.
G-straining is basically trying to get as much blood into your head as possible because it's all trying to rush out. So you kind of crunch everything up, make all your muscles tight, your legs, your stomach, your calves, and try and keep all the blood in your head.
6 and 7, break right, Bandit, you're 6 o'clock, 2 miles, slightly behind. Tally.
What you're experiencing now is an example of the physical exertion a pilot goes through in a dogfight. Listen to his breathing as he throws his jet into a 9G turn.
Snap. Sure. 8-7, request handout from below. Your handout from below, Easy 6 reporting, 3-man. 8-7 is engaged. Oh, I don't think so. Flares.
In a fight like this, the risk of blacking out is just as dangerous as the potential threat from the enemy.
Really like to do. Let's go over the top. 8-7, handout from above. Clear. Visual. 8-7 is engaged.
He's flying number 2 in a formation of 4 Hornets. At 300 meters, they fly into clouds, and then climb up to 9,000 meters. Waiting for them is Karg and the French Mirages, and a fuel tanker. In a real combat mission, the target could be well outside the jet's maximum range. So the pilots practice refueling. When they're finished, Brandon's 4 bombers hold until they're given the instruction to drop down to 300 meters and push into enemy territory. On the way in, the strikers shake off an aggressor. Then, they have 3 minutes to bomb the target and leave. The last jet drops his bombs with just 15 seconds to spare. Flying home, Brandon's wing is targeted by the ADATs.
When I was targeted, it showed in the HUD, my heads-up display, that I was targeted. It took me about a second to process and go, oh, this is not good.
The ADATS missile is a laser rider, and it takes about 3.5 seconds for the laser to designate the target and the missile to go to range coincidence or hit that target. So from the time the pilot has an indication that he's being lased by the ADATS, it's approximately 3.5 seconds before the target is destroyed.
So then turn my aircraft hard to the right in this case, and put the missile right on the kind of left 9 o'clock, and then started jinking. So vertical jink is you roll over upside down, you pull about 6G down to about 45 degrees nose down, light the afterburners, go as fast as you can go, and then pitch back up again at as many G's as you can handle. Try not to black out, roll upside down, and do the whole process again until that missile gets defeated.
But the scientists at the Air Force Research Laboratory in Mesa, Arizona, are developing a training plan that means in the near future, pilots like Brandon could be flying in exercises that actually blend maple flag with virtual flag.
I absolutely think combining the live and virtual is going to be possible, and that's actually what we're working for.
Pilots in simulators and pilots in real jets would be able to see and fly with one another. It would then be possible to have them train in huge wars that could not be created in the real world because of logistics and cost.
But perhaps someday our allied forces will be called upon to fight an adversary that has lots of airplanes, dozens, scores, perhaps hundreds. We can generate those kinds of airplanes in the simulated environment so they can get the toughest experience possible before they have to do it in combat.
But in the future, pilots might also fight these conflicts by remote control, using the same simulators we have just seen them training in.
You fly in a virtual flag in all simulated environments one day, but in the next day you get in the very same training device that looks like a cockpit. We flip a red guarded switch, and through using things, sensors in the global information grid, perhaps armed unmanned aerial vehicles, we put actual effects on a target on the other side of the world.
Unmanned vehicles controlled by pilots on the ground are already doing some of the jobs that the pilots at Maple Flag are training for.
Jets are flown from the ground. Predators are flown from the ground. Global Hawks are flown from the ground. Reconnaissance missions are flown from the ground. We're dropping bombs from aircraft, from people operating those aircraft from the ground. That happens right now, and it will continue to evolve throughout the future.
Unmanned vehicles are far cheaper to build and operate than manned fighters. For example, the latest plane in the US Air Force Armory, the F-22 Raptor stealth fighter, is estimated to cost around 263 million euros per plane.
By some accounts, up to a third of the money we spend on an airplane is to keep the pilot alive and functioning. So if we can take some of that money and use it for sensors or effects delivery platforms or different weapons, then I think we're getting more bang for our buck.
Most experts agree that the enemy of the future will not buy expensive jets either. because the cheapest way to counter air attack is with missiles. And as American Paul Battiche found during his Maple Flag mission, missiles are very effective. The side he was trying to destroy defended itself aggressively against him.
I mean, I'm dead already, essentially.
During the mission, maintenance issues forced 2 of Paul's 4 F-16s back to base, leaving his ability to defend himself against an SA-11 missile severely reduced.
So I have no idea if the threat's still on.
Communication with the AWACS informed him that there was a high probability that he'd been hit.
We got 12 minutes.
But until he gets into the pilot debrief, he won't know just how bad his day was. In the final mission at Maple Flag, 4 French Mirages flew with Canadian Brandon Robinson and 4 other CF-18s to bomb an illegal chemical weapons factory in enemy territory. French pilot Carg explains how he evaded an aggressor on the way to the target.
And we fly, and we see a MiG-1, and we dive in low level altitude, and after we drop the bombs and come back here at Cold Lake.
But American Paul Battiche came up against the deadliest surface-to-air missile, the SA-11. He was targeted and shot at least once that he knows of. But in a pilot debrief, he learns the full extent of the damage.
A few high PK SAM engagements today. That's where basically all of our losses occurred.
Sadly, I got targeted by that system 3 different times, and according to the folks here at Maple Flag, they said that there were 3 high probability of kills against me. And so it was just a tough day dealing with the new, more capable SAM system and being able to threat react to it.
And this is what Maple Flag is all about. It's here that pilots can make their mistakes and learn. Because next time Paul Battiche comes up against an SA-11, it could be the real thing. The 10 days of flying at Maple Flag has left its mark on the pilots. They've learned lessons that one day may save their lives.
I think my skills have improved as a pilot, for one on the planning side, and on the other side, flying-wise, of course. We have like an environment here we don't have in Europe. You can fly much more along the realistic threats than in Germany.
Learning how to operate in such a situation safely and having integrated together all your tactics and executing them, I think that's the major learning point for myself. And I think I've benefited a lot, and I think I come out a better pilot.
During normal training at our home base with very few aircraft, very few surface-to-air threats, you can only go so far, and you can kind of top out. But in a real complex scenario like this, with lots of enemy aircraft, lots of surface-to-air threats, you can really get some good training. So I feel like my training is kind of went up a notch.
Brandon's jet, the F-18 Hornet, is built here at Boeing in St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. And it's here that the future of aerial warfare is also being developed. This is the X-45 unmanned combat vehicle, the brainchild of Darrell Davis, Vice President of Boeing's Advanced Unmanned Systems.
This airplane is like a razor blade in the sky. And so you can do things that you've never done before and not put the humans at risk.
One of the risks is keeping the pilot in the air for long periods of time, sometimes up to 14 or 15 hours. Unmanned jets can operate over the battlefield continuously.
You can do things that human beings can't tolerate, where unmanned airplanes, they don't care.
This prototype X-45 has a wingspan of over 10 meters. And as well as being able to fly reconnaissance missions, it's designed to carry bombs and other weapons to destroy enemy air defenses. The job that manned jets are doing now.
So the manned airplanes are more effective, and they're also safer. They're not the ones being shot at.
In 2004, the X-45 made aviation history. Controlled by an operator on the ground, it successfully dropped a 113-kilogram bomb on target from over 10,000 meters.
I believe the day will come when it will be acceptable to have airplanes in the sky doing things that manned airplanes do today, and we will take the men out of the machines. I believe that day will come. I won't predict when it will come, but I do believe it will come.
So, is it just a matter of time before even the escort jets protecting bombers no longer have a man in the cockpit, but are flown by sky fighters of the future, From simulators a virtual world away.
Number 2 engaged, bullseye, 073.
You know, the classic dogfight that makes great movies, where one airplane is just a couple feet behind the other, has been over for some time, but it sure makes a great movie. What isn't over is that man-to-man combat, whether you're doing it from a couple hundred feet, a couple thousand feet, or perhaps a couple thousand miles.
Man fighters may be in jeopardy, and in the fighter community, we may be a dying breed, which is unfortunate. My son really wants to be a fighter pilot when he grows up, and he may not have the chance.